The voicemail came in at 2014 on a Tuesday afternoon, and I almost didn't listen to it because I was elbow deep in a sink full of my daughter's painting smocks. My husband's voice, easy and warm, telling me the firm needed him in Denver through the weekend. The Hargrove merger had hit a snag. He'd call me before bed. He said he loved me. He said to kiss the kids. And I stood there with soap dripping off my wrists and felt nothing wrong at all. Because why would I? 8 years of marriage teaches you a certain kind of faith. The lazy kind. The kind that stops checking because checking feels like an insult. I'm going to tell you everything, and I need you to understand that I was not a suspicious person. I want that on the record. I baked. I ran the school auction. I was the woman other women called the morning after a fight because I always knew the calm thing to say. His name was Bradford, and I'd loved him since I was 23. We met at a wedding in Asheville, both of us seated at the table for people the bride didn't know what to do with. He had a way of leaning in when you talked, like whatever you were saying was the only thing happening in the room. Our kids came fast after we married, a boy and then a girl 11 months apart, and people used to joke that we were running a daycare. Ren was 7 now. Beckett was 8. They were the whole shape of my life. The thing that started it wasn't dramatic. It was a receipt. I was cleaning out the center console of his car to vacuum it, a Saturday chore, totally ordinary, and there was a crumpled receipt from a pharmacy in a town I'd never heard of, 2 hours south. Prenatal vitamins. The expensive kind, the ones I'd taken when I was carrying Beckett. I held it for a long time. I told myself a coworker. I told myself a gift. I told myself 11 different stories standing in the driveway, and not one of them was the true one, because the true one was too big to fit in my mouth. I didn't confront him. That's the first thing I did right. I want you to remember that because everything I'm about to tell you depends on it. I put the receipt back exactly where I found it, smoothed the way it had been crumpled, and I closed the console and I vacuumed the car and I made dinner. Pot roast. He ate 2 helpings and told me I was the best thing that ever happened to him, and I smiled and passed the rolls. Then I called a private investigator. His office was in a strip mall between a vape shop and a place that did taxes, and I almost turned around in the parking lot 3 times. His name was Hollis, an older man with reading glasses pushed up into white hair, and he didn't act surprised by anything I said. He told me most people who come to him already know. They just need a stranger to make it real. I gave him the dates of Bradford's last 4 business trips. I gave him the make of the car and the town on the receipt. I wrote a check that made my stomach drop, and I drove home and made the kids grilled cheese. He called me 9 days later and asked me to come to his office instead of telling me over the phone. I knew then. The drive over, I kept both hands on the wheel and I didn't cry because some animal part of me had already started getting ready. There was a folder. There were photographs. And there was a video, which he turned his monitor toward me and let me watch without saying a word. It was a birthing center, one of those soft, expensive places with linen curtains and a garden, the kind that costs more than a hospital and calls itself a wellness retreat. And there was my husband in the parking lot carrying a car seat. The little gray bucket kind with the ruffled sunshade. And next to him, holding a balloon and a vase of peonies, was his mother. My mother-in-law. The woman who'd hemmed my wedding dress, and behind her his brother, filming on his phone, laughing. They were all there, the whole family I'd folded myself into for 8 years, gathered in a parking lot to welcome a baby that was not mine, born to a woman I had never met, while I sat at home making grilled cheese and believing in Denver. I didn't make a sound. Hollis handed me a tissue I didn't use and waited. After a while, I asked him if the baby was Bradford's. He said the woman's name was on a lease for an apartment Bradford had been paying for since the previous spring. Since I was planning Beckett's 7th birthday party, since I'd been telling everyone how lucky I was, I want to tell you about the drive home from that office because it's the most important part. Somewhere on the highway, the grief just stopped, like a faucet. And what came in behind it was the clearest thinking I have ever done in my life. I started doing math. Not emotional math. Real math. Whose name was on what? What I knew that he didn't know, I knew. And by the time I pulled into our driveway, into our house, the house I had decorated and cleaned and made into a home, I was no longer a wife who'd been betrayed. I was a woman with a head start. Here's what nobody tells you about being underestimated for 8 years. You learn where everything is kept. I knew our finances better than he did, because he found money boring and I found it interesting. I knew the savings, the brokerage account, the kids' college funds. I knew that the down payment on our house had come entirely from an inheritance my grandmother left me, and that because we'd never refinanced and because I'd been the one to handle the closing while Bradford was, ironically, on a business trip, my name was the only one on the deed. He'd never noticed. Why would he? He'd signed where I pointed and gone back to his phone. I didn't move out. I didn't scream. The next morning, I made him eggs and I asked about Denver, and he told me a lie about the Hargrove merger so detailed and so relaxed that I understood he'd been lying to me expertly for the better part of a year, and that the man I'd loved since I was 23 was, in some real sense, a person I had never actually met. I made an appointment with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I called my college roommate, who is now a partner at a firm in the city, and I told her everything, and there was a silence on the line, and then she said, in a voice I'd never heard her use, that she was clearing her Thursday. Her name was Delia, and she had spent 15 years representing women who'd been handled the way I'd been handled, and she did not lose. We sat in her conference room with the folder from Hollis between us, and she walked me through it like a general walking a battlefield. The house was mine, free and clear. The inheritance was separate property, and I had the paper trail to prove it. The apartment Bradford had been paying for, the lease, the prenatal vitamins billed to our joint card, the wellness retreat that cost as much as a car, all of it was marital money spent on the affair, which meant it could be charged back against his share. Delia called it dissipation of assets. I called it him handing me the shovel. The hardest part wasn't the legal part. The hardest part was Beckett and Wren. I'd been so careful around them, but children are not stupid, and mine were paying attention in ways that broke my heart. It was Wren, my 7-year-old, who said it first, over breakfast on a morning Bradford was supposedly in Denver. She was pushing cereal around her bowl and she said, not looking up, "Daddy doesn't really go to Denver, does he?" Not a question, a statement. I asked her why she'd say that, and she said because Daddy's suitcase smells like a baby, like the lotion. The purple kind. And she looked at me with those steady eyes, and I realized she'd known before I had. She'd just been waiting for a grown-up to catch up. Beckett knew too. He'd seen the apartment. Bradford had taken him once, told him it was a place from work, sat him in front of a tablet for an hour while I don't know what. Beckett described a crib, a woman's voice in another room. He told no one because he didn't have words for it, only a bad feeling he'd carried around like a stone in his shoe. My 8-year-old. Carrying that alone. That was the moment something in me went from cold to absolute. Delia and I moved with a precision that I am still, to this day, a little proud of. Over the course of 3 weeks, while Bradford floated in and out telling me about a merger that did not exist, I quietly did the following. I moved the kids' college funds, which were in accounts only I had signing authority on, into trusts they couldn't be touched. I transferred my grandmother's inheritance, the part that was still liquid, into an account at a different bank entirely. I enrolled Beckett and Wren in a new school district, the one near my sister's, with paperwork already signed and a start date already set. Because Delia said custody favors stability and the parent who provides it. And I changed the locks on the house. My house. The one with my name on the deed. I did it on a Friday, the day Bradford was due home from Denver. I want you to picture it the way it happened, because I've replayed it more times than I'll admit. I had the kids at my sister's. Their rooms in a new place were already painted. Wren's a pale yellow. Beckett's the green he'd been asking for. I sat in our living room, my living room, with the folder from Hollis and the papers from Delia on the coffee table, and I waited. His car pulled in at 6:40. I heard the suitcase wheels on the walk. I heard his key in the lock, and then the small, confused jiggle of it not turning. And then the knock. My husband, knocking on the door of his own house. He called my name through the wood, half laughing. telling me the key was stuck. I opened the door and let him see his suitcases, lined up on the porch, packed. I have never seen a man's face do what his did. The merger Denver, the whole architecture of lies he'd built. I watched him reach for it and find it gone. Because on the coffee table behind me, visible through the open door, was a peony. A single peony and a glass of water. The same flower from the parking lot. I'd bought it that morning. I wanted him to understand without a word that I knew everything. He started to talk. They always start to talk. I'll spare you the speech, the way they make it sound like the affair happened to him, like a weather event, like he was a bystander to his own choices. I let him finish. Then I told him my lawyer would be in touch, and I gave him the name, and I watched something go out of his eyes when he heard it. Because Delia's reputation traveled ahead of her like cold air. His family came next, of course. His mother called 12 times in 2 days. When I finally answered, she didn't ask how I was. She asked what I'd done to the family. To the family. As if I were the one who'd carried a balloon into a parking lot. She told me Bradford had made a mistake, but that mistakes happen in long marriages, and I was being vindictive and the children needed their father. I let her talk until she ran out of air. Then I told her I had the video. The one her other son had filmed, laughing. There was a silence so total I could hear her breathing. She never called again. The divorce took 11 months. I won't pretend it was clean. He hired someone, then someone else, and they tried everything, including the thing where they paint the wife as unstable, but it's hard to land that punch on a woman who's calm in every deposition and has every document tabbed and dated. Delia laid it all out for the judge. The dissipation, the secret apartment, the marital funds funneled to a second household, while the family I built went on believing in Denver. The judge was a woman in her 60s who looked at the spreadsheet of the wellness retreat charges over the top of her glasses for a long, long moment. I kept the house. My grandmother's inheritance stayed mine, untouchable. The marital assets were split, but the dissipated money was charged back against his half, which meant his half was thinner than the air he'd been selling me. I got primary custody. He got every other weekend, supervised at first, because of what Beckett described and what a counselor confirmed. He pays support that reflects what he actually earns, which Delia's forensic accountant established was considerably more than he'd been claiming. But I'll tell you the part that mattered most. The part I think about when people ask me, carefully, if I'm all right. The kids are okay. That's the whole victory right there. Not the house, not the money, though God knows the money let me breathe. It's that Wren sleeps through the night now in her yellow room. It's that Beckett laughs again, the real laugh, the one that takes over his whole face. We made it through the first year. We made it through the first holidays, just the 3 of us, and my sister and her family, and there was a moment at the table when Wren said grace without being asked and thanked God for our new house and our old dog and for Mommy. And I had to look at the ceiling for a second to keep myself together. People want this story to be about revenge. I understand why. There's something satisfying in the suitcases on the porch, the locked door, the peony in the glass. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something fierce and clean in those moments. But it was never really about him. The day I stopped grieving on that highway, what I was actually doing was choosing my children over the lie I'd been living, and the cold thing that came in to replace the grief wasn't hatred. It was love. Love wearing armor. I saw him once, a few months ago at Beckett's soccer game. He was standing at the far end of the field, alone. The woman from the birthing center is gone, I heard. Took the baby and went back to her own family when the money got thin, which is its own kind of justice. I never had to lift a finger for. He looked older, smaller. He raised a hand to me hesitant, and I nodded back. Because we share 2 children and I am not interested in teaching them that hate is the answer to anything. But I didn't walk over. I stood with my sister and I watched my son chase a ball across the grass under a wide blue sky, and when he scored he turned and looked for me in the stands, only me, and I was already on my feet. That's where I'll leave it. A woman in the bleachers, on her feet, while her boy looks for her face in the crowd and finds it, the way he always will, because I made sure of it. I built a life out of the wreckage of the one I was handed, and it is quieter than the old one and smaller, and it is entirely, finally true. The thing I keep coming back to is that highway, the exact stretch of road where the grief shut off and the clear thinking turned on. For a long time, I felt guilty about that, like a normal woman would have wept all the way home. But I've made peace with it now. What happened on that drive wasn't me turning cold. It was me deciding, in one quiet breath, that my children were going to be okay no matter what it cost me. Everything after that was just doing the work. People look at how it ended and assume I got lucky. I didn't. Bradford got exactly what he built. He spent a year telling careful lies, moving our money into a second life, leaning on his own mother to carry balloons into a parking lot, and he never once stopped to ask what would happen if the woman at home was paying attention. He underestimated me for 8 years, and that underestimation was the very thing that handed me the win. Cause and effect. You can't betray someone slowly and steadily and then act surprised when the steadiness comes back around as the thing that ruins you. The mistress left when the money got thin. His family went silent when the truth had a video attached. None of that was revenge I had to chase. It was just the natural weight of what they'd each chosen, settling where it belonged. If I've learned anything worth handing to you, it's that the day everything falls apart is the day 3 things in you get tested at once, and you find out fast which ones you've actually built. The first is your character, whether you'll stoop to their level or hold a line you can be proud of when your kids are old enough to ask. I never lied to Bradford the way he lied to me. I never used the children as weapons. I let the facts do the cutting. The second is your mind, whether you've bothered to understand your own life well enough to protect it. I knew where the deed was, whose name was on what, how the inheritance was titled, because I cared about the boring details for years while he scrolled his phone. Knowledge I gathered in peacetime is what saved me in war. And the third is the sheer will to keep getting up, to make grilled cheese and run the auction and stay calm in every deposition for 11 straight months when what I wanted was to scream. That kind of steadiness isn't loud. It's just showing up every single day, refusing to break in front of 2 children who needed at least one parent standing. I think about Wren in her yellow room and Beckett's real laugh coming back, and I understand that none of it was given to me. I built it, one honest, clear-eyed, stubborn decision at a time. So if you're standing in your own driveway right now holding a receipt you can't explain, hear me. Don't waste the clarity that comes after the grief. Be the kind of person you'd want your child to grow into. Know your own life down to the paperwork and outlast the people who counted on you crumbling. That's the whole thing. That's how a quiet woman wins.